I meditate for practice. Channel 9 News tell me I'm moving backwards. 8 blacks left, death is around the corner. 7 misleading statements by my persona. 6 headlights waving in my direction. 5-4 asking me what's in my possession. Yeah, I keep running, jumping the aqueducts, fire hydrants and hazardous smoke alarms on the back of us. But no one don't cry for me, ride for me, try for me, live for me, breathe for me, sing for me, honestly guiding me. I could be more than I gotta be, still for me, lie to me, nation, hypocrisy, gold on me, driving me, wicked, my spirit inspired me like, yeah. Open correctional gates in high desert. Open our minds for cast away oppression. Open the streets and watch our beliefs, and when they carve my name inside the concrete, I pray it forever.
And there you have it. Vice President Kamala Harris just wrapped up her address at the Democratic National Convention, officially accepting the nomination for president. Welcome to America's Vote 2024 post-show coverage. I'm Mychael Schnell. We're heading now straight to the DNC with the Hill's national politics reporter Julia Manchester, who's been on the ground in Chicago all week and was in the arena tonight for VP Harris's speech. Julia, give us a sense of the energy in Chicago and what the energy was like in that room tonight when Kamala Harris was speaking.
Yeah, well, Mychael, it was certainly electric. There was certainly a feeling of anticipation ahead of Kamala Harris's speech. It was really a star-studded night. You had Hank performing, you had Eva Longoria speaking, you had a scandal reunion between actors Kerry Washington and Tony Goldwyn, and then of course you had a very personal touch to the evening with Kamala Harris's family, including her stepdaughter Ella, her niece Nina Harris, as well as her great nieces, talking about her, and most importantly, or most notably, I would say, is of course Maya Harris, her sister, who sort of gave an introduction, more of a biographical, look at Kamala Harris. I will say that in the run-up to this, the rumor mill, Mychael, and you and I were texting about this, was really on fire about whether there would be a major special guest, namely Beyonce. That obviously did not happen, but whoever ginned up that rumor, if their goal was getting more eyeballs, getting more people to be anticipating this, I think they succeeded.
Yeah, I mean, definitely probably some disappointed folks in that arena despite all this excitement, but I'm sure the excitement is going to outweigh that. Let's dive into the speech a little bit, Julia, because this was such a big moment, arguably the biggest moment in Kamala Harris's political career. Was it everything we were expecting?
I think it was. She hit, a lot of the notes we were expecting her to hit, that biographical note. Remember, a lot of people know who Kamala Harris is. She's obviously the vice president, but, there are probably some pieces of her biography that they do not know about her. And I thought it was notable that she spoke so much about her mother and how her mother has really influenced her and her sister's lives. Her sister also talked quite a bit about that during her speech. So that was definitely a huge part of that. She also got into obviously attacking former President Trump and really painting herself, notably as tougher on crime, something that, crime has been this issue that Republicans in particular have really, tried to attack Democrats over.
Rhetoric about Donald Trump is something I wanted to ask you about. This convention, sort of the theme has been joy, and folks have definitely leaned into criticizing former President Trump, but they've also tried to have this uplifting spirit. How did Kamala Harris thread that needle between, as she frequently likes to say, prosecuting the case against Trump, but also having this joyful feeling that Democrats have really been pushing all week?
Right. Well, what she did was essentially, talk about Donald Trump, criticize Donald Trump, his policies, his rhetoric. But she wrapped up on a very personal note. She talked about moving forward. That was how she, ended her speech. The view looking forward, how the country can move forward together. It was very unifying, and I think they're very much trying to contrast that with former President Trump, painting his campaign as dark, negative, and also, to quote Tim Walz and other Democrats, is weird. So they kept that forward-looking energy, really tapping into that same energy that President Obama tapped into during his 2008 presidential campaign. And I think they, succeeded in that. This was largely a very upbeat, convention. At the same time, though, I would be remiss to say that there weren't emotional moments during tonight. One of the notable emotional moments was when you had a number of gun control advocates and survivors take to the stage, people who had lost family members to gun violence, including a Uvalde school shooting, mother of a Uvalde school shooting victim, who talked about that. Lucy McBath, a congresswoman from Georgia who lost her son to gun violence, and Sandy Hook Elementary teacher. That was very emotional. So, I think the DNC, what they did throughout the night and really throughout the week, each night, was have these high energy moments with some of these performances. Obviously, the roll call was a big example of that. But then they sprinkled them in, or they sprinkled those high energy moments in, but also had very somber moments to talk about the importance of this moment in the election as Democrats to try to paint that contrast with Donald Trump.
And Julia, I want to ask you quickly about the elephant who was not in the room tonight, President Biden. He was honored a bunch of times this week, including in Kamala Harris's speech. It was the first thing she mentioned after recognizing her family and wishing her husband a happy anniversary, 10 years married today. What did you hear from lawmakers and delegates and other folks you spoke to at the convention this week about President Biden? Was there a longing for him? Were folks reassured that he wasn't at the top of the ticket? Was it really just respect for him? What were you hearing about Biden? Because he was there on the first day, he spoke, he was honored, and then he left Chicago, and he was sort of an afterthought in all the following speeches.
Yeah, it was respect for Biden. It was, you heard throughout the week chants of "Thank you, Joe," and "We love you, Joe," talking about President Biden's agenda, an agenda that Kamala Harris can rightfully call her agenda as well. So you've heard that in every major speaker's address, whether it was Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, with the exception of Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama notably did not mention Joe Biden once during her speech, but in a number of these addresses, a lot of these speakers, like Kamala Harris, started out thanking Joe Biden, talking about how Joe Biden has played such a major part, in the Democratic Party, how he is, where the party is today. So I would say it's definitely respect. I will note that earlier today, Joe Biden and Jill Biden posted a photo to X on social media. They're standing next to a television, I believe, in California, together with a phone on speakerphone. Said they talked to Kamala Harris, that they had spoken to her. So they were clearly in touch with her today. I think you'll see President Biden praise Harris after this. This is going to be obviously a pretty electric few, hours for Democrats as they come down from the convention high. But as Kamala Harris said, it's time to get to work. Going forward, it may not be as rosy as it has been for her over the past month. She's going to have a debate with Donald Trump. Tim Walz is going to debate J.D. Vance. She will likely sit down with a major news network or a major U.S. publication. Polls will likely get tighter, even though they're already tight as it is, after Labor Day, as they do in elections. So this is where the hard work for Democrats and also Republicans starts.
All right, Julia Manchester from The Hill, my friend, live from Chicago for us. Thank you so much. Go get some pizza or a hot dog and maybe snag a few hours of sleep. It was a busy week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. I'll get some deep dish.
And stick around. We've got much more live coverage tonight. In just a few minutes, Scott Tranter from Decision Desk HQ will join us to break down the latest polling numbers and what we can expect to see moving forward to November. Stay tuned. we're back with more America's Vote 2024 live coverage. Joining me now is Scott Tranter, Director of Data and Science for Decision Desk HQ. Scott, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to get right into it. Kamala Harris just made history as the first woman of color to accept a presidential nomination. What are your biggest takeaways from her big speech tonight?
Biggest takeaways is, look, the energy in the room and what she brought, right? This was a way different than what we saw Joe Biden's speech on Monday, which was well received, but there was a lot more energy here. She had a much more forward-looking speech. She didn't touch a lot on policy, but generally speaking, people don't in these speeches. She was trying to introduce herself, her vision, her background, what makes her her for this audience. And, you know, if the ratings are anything like the past few nights, there are going to be 20, 30 million people who watch this.
And Scott, throughout the week, hope was a driving message that we saw in this convention with different speeches, different videos. Is that resonating with voters? Because there's been some question about the democracy argument resonating with voters. We know that abortion and women's reproductive rights is potent among the Democratic base. But what about hope? What's the numbers coming back for this hope message?
Well, no, it's interesting. It's kind of funny, right? The campaign season for most voters hasn't even started yet. I feel like, Michael, you and I have been talking about this for almost a year now, but most voters aren't going to really tune in for another 10 days. And so we're going to see what those numbers come out with in terms of how they receive her message. But what I will say is what voters have been thinking the last 5-6 months, looking at both candidates, for the majority of it, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, they were looking for a candidate to bring them a forward-looking, hope-based message. And we're going to see if those poll numbers continue to shift towards her, because that's the message she brought tonight.
It was an A-list of speakers this week, Democratic heavy hitters like the Obamas, the Clintons, stars like Kerry Washington. We saw Pink perform. How much is their support? How important is that for Harris in the lead up to November? We know that Obama, for example, both of the Obamas are very popular within the Democratic base. Is the Hollywood effect really effective for the Harris campaign? What are these surrogates doing for the campaign?
Well, look, they get visibility among average voters, because guess what? Average voters, they care about celebrities. They care about what these singers, these actors, these sports figures, what they do. That's basically what people watch every day. And so this is a good juxtaposition for the Democrats. The last convention I was at like this was 2008. And Barack Obama brought this kind of star power. This is not something we've seen at a Democratic convention or a Republican convention probably since then. And it turned out well for Barack Obama in 2008. This is certainly some good momentum for her coming out of this convention week.
And let's talk about now the past 5 weeks, because they have been a wild ride for voters across the country, but especially for Kamala Harris. Since taking over the Democratic ticket, we've seen her polls improve, and we're just now less than 90 days away to the presidential election. Decision Desk HQ is forecasting that Vice President Harris is leading Trump by almost 3% nationwide. Are we going to see major changes in the polls going forward, or has the vice president proven that her support is rock steady? I know I've spoken to a number of House Republicans who have said this is a honeymoon period and that Democrats are on a sugar rush, and that after we get past Memorial Day, things are going to calm down. After we get past Labor Day, Memorial Day, things are going to calm down a little bit.
Yeah, no, look, about 7-8 weeks ago when you threw that graphic up after that first debate when we talked about it was Donald Trump ahead. Now, wasn't ahead by a lot, 2 or 3 points. She's now ahead 2 or 3 points. As you point out, it could be a honeymoon, but this is going to sound pretty crazy. First people get to vote in North Carolina in less than 2 weeks. So, you know, if the honeymoon period sticks around any longer, votes are going to come in while she's ahead. And I think that's what the Donald Trump campaign's worried about, is they need to stem this momentum and get the polls back in their favor, because voters are going to go to the polls pretty soon.
Scott, I was excited when I saw that we had you as a guest tonight, because I wanted to ask you about the other side of the aisle, the Republican Party. There's speculation that RFK Jr. will be suspending his campaign tomorrow and endorsing Trump. RFK Jr. is giving a speech on the path forward for his campaign, and Trump said he'll have a special guest at his rally. They're going to be in the same state tomorrow. How significant would RFK Jr. endorsement for Trump be for his campaign? We've seen that these polls are extremely close, and RFK Jr. is polling pretty low, but could that small contingent, if they ultimately do follow his lead and go to Trump, I mean, how significant are we talking here?
Pretty significant. I'll say, look, in the last 20 minutes, we just confirmed this on our side. RFK Jr.'s petitioned to have his name removed from the ballot in Arizona. So that gives you a little foresight into what we think he's going to announce tomorrow. Now, the thought is he endorses Donald Trump, and that would make sense because if he comes off the ballot, it appears that most of his supporters go to Donald Trump to the tune of 1 or 2% nationally and 1 or 2% in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now, 1 or 2% doesn't seem like a lot. But again, this race is on the margins. This race is going to be determined by 1 or 2 points. So it'll be pretty significant, the fact that if he actually drops out tomorrow and if he actually endorses Donald Trump, it'll be a boost to the Trump campaign.
70-something days, a lot can happen, but we are certainly getting closer and closer. Scott Tranter from Decision Desk HQ, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Welcome back to The Hill's live coverage of the DNC of Kamala Harris's speech, which we just heard. I'm Robby Soave, host of Rising, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jessica Burbank. So let's get into it. I think Kamala Harris did a smart thing by not talking way too long. We've all been up way too late these last several nights, and the criticism of Donald Trump at the RNC was that it went on and on and on forever. So smart to be brief. And look, I will admit that while I'm not a fan of her or her policies, I think she did an effective job. In the past, where she's really struggled in terms of speaking is off the cuff answering questions. She tends to talk in these kind of vague, almost philosophical statements that have gotten mocked. This was just reading a speech from a teleprompter, which is not so difficult, but she did it well. She brought enough energy to it. It was mostly, autobiographical, which makes sense because not everyone knows who she is. They know she's the vice president, but she didn't have to run a campaign to get here. She was picked, as we've said in the last several weeks, to be the Democratic nominee. So I feel like it was a reintroduction that I can see playing well with independent and undecided voters.
Right. She opened the speech thanking her husband, Doug. It's their anniversary today. Someone said he is the epitome of wife guys. Can you imagine your wife wishing you an anniversary as she accepts the nomination for president? She then, like an AIM profile, I don't know if you had this technology, but
yes, I had an AIM profile.
Okay.
Jessica Burbank.
Did you in middle school
complete with Good Charlotte and My Chemical Romance lyrics as my way message?
Music and quotes. Okay, but we did a horrible thing.
Millennial. Go ahead.
We ranked our friends like, oh, so-and-so is my best friend, and then I will mention Natalie, and then
you don't even know
Daisy.
what a MySpace top 8 is. We had that, but
she basically did that.
Anyway,
because she's like, thank you to my husband, thank you to Joe Biden, thank you to Jill Biden, then the delegates, and then her supporters. And so it felt like that, like a ranking in an AIM profile. But I think she did a good job telling her personal story. She talked about how her mom was going to get an arranged marriage, and then in an act of self-determination, married this guy she met at a civil rights rally. She talked about her career as a prosecutor as being inspired by her friend Wanda, who was being abused by her stepfather, which is a weird theme at the DNC this time around, people being abused by their stepfather. Two prominent stories on that, but a horrible thing inspired her to be a prosecutor. And then she said that she always charged her crimes not in the victim's name, but for the people, because all of these crimes are crimes against the people. And when one of us is hurt, we're all hurt by crimes in our society. And then she says her only client ever has been the people, and Donald Trump's only client ever has been himself, which is good writing in this speech.
Yeah, I mean, I guess all of a sudden it's popular and good to be a cop again. I thought Democrats have been running against cops and against billionaires, but then except for the ones that get on stage at the DNC, those are the good guys, Kamala Harris and J.B. Pritzker, not anyone else. But, you know, like I said, I think it was a good speech. I mean, it was set up to be a good speech. This whole thing is a pep rally. It was very light on substance, which is not surprising to me. I was actually, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Of course, the very much boosting the Democratic ticket people on, for instance, CNN said that, I couldn't believe how much substance there was in it. No, there was not a lot of substance. It was mostly autobiographical, which makes sense because she has to explain who she is to the people watching, to the millions watching, and I think she did a good job of that. And look, I think this is a very close race. The Democrats are fired up. She's fighting for it. They are energized. She made her pitch. Obviously, she can't run on, because this is not the way people think, she can't run on like so much the successes of the administration, because the mood of the country is dissatisfaction with the administration on so many initiatives, so many policies that she was a part of, economy, immigration, et cetera. So she's not, touting the successes. She's saying, can you stomach the idea of Donald Trump being president again for 4 years? And that might end up being a successful pitch. But I wanted to ask you specifically what you thought about her statements on Israel and Gaza, which came up. There was a little bit of substance there. Obviously, some on the progressive left have been hoping or expecting her to make a little bit of a more forceful break from the administration from Biden on those policies. Biden is so unpopular with progressives in terms of the Israel issue. But what I heard was mostly the same things that he's been saying and doing. What was your take?
Yeah, I will say I did think it was substantive. She talked about not cutting Social Security and Medicare. She talked about codifying Roe. She talked about the goal of her presidency being fighting for a strong middle class, passing the bipartisan border bill. And I do think establishing who she is as a person in itself is substantive. People care about someone's personal story and their perspective. She also talked about her track record and what she got done as a prosecutor. And so did Roy Cooper before that, talked about how she had a $4 billion case with the banks, suing the big Wall Street banks for fraud.
She had a job in between being a prosecutor and now that she didn't talk about as much. But go ahead.
That turned into a $20 billion deal. So it was a substantive speech. What she said on Israel and Gaza, I think she did what mainstream media has been criticized for doing. And that is to use language that is passive when talking about Palestine, to say what has happened in Gaza, and to say the lives we've lost in Gaza. But when she talks about Israel, she talks about actions of sexual misconduct by Hamas. She talked about killing by Hamas. But when she's talking about Palestine, it's the same thing mainstream media does. The lives were lost. No, American-made weapons were sent to Israel, and they were used to kill innocent women and children. And there's on-video sexual misconduct there that was not mentioned. And so while it's great, she says she believes Palestine deserves a right to self-determination, we've heard that in State Department briefings before. So it's not a diverse.
Exactly. Very much doubted that Kamala Harris would be at all different from Joe Biden on foreign policy and on that issue in particular. I think it was just hopes and vibes trying to manifest that progressive people were trying to do, that it was going to be different. So I was not at all surprised that it was exactly in line, again, with the policy she's been a part of, because she is the sitting vice president. She has co-signed, has been a part of all the policies that have been taking place for the last year. And so and how can she make that pitch to the American people when they're so dissatisfied with them? She really can't, but she can make the pitch that, look, I'm running against Donald Trump, and he is a very unpopular person, and she's making the case that I'm for America. There was a lot of patriotism tonight, a lot of rah-rah. Actually, Democrats are the party of patriotism, which, you know, make whatever you will of it. It probably, again, plays well. We're talking about thousands of voters in the swing states and winning them over to the Democratic ticket or the Republican ticket. They might have appreciated that kind of stuff. So I think overall, both conventions really were highly, highly effective spectacles for the respective candidates. And this is going to be an extremely close election that anyone could win. We were just a little disappointed, of course, that there was no special guest
Beyonce
appearance, no Taylor Swift, no.
We were told there was going to be something
there was
or
Pink
someone.
and the Dixie
George
Chicks.
W. Bush,
the Chicks.
Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, George Bush. Someone thought it was going to be George Bush.
Yes, George W. Bush's office. W had to put out a statement that it was not him.
Yes.
Beyonce
All the
did.
Former
Mitt
Republicans.
Romney said it's not me.
I saw his statement. Har.
So I don't know what happened. Who was it? Who started the rumor? I'm writing in special guest for president. Come on, November.
In some ways, Kamala Harris is herself the special guest, as she was not scheduled to be the candidate, the nominee, until very, very, very recently.
You guys aren't going to believe it. We're nominating the vice president tonight.
As much as I have criticized the decision by Democratic Party insiders, elites, and the donor class to suddenly and dramatically, push the incumbent president off the ledge and substitute Kamala Harris in terms of Democratic norms and all that, it is pretty clear so far that it's been a successful political gambit in terms of dramatically improving the Democrats' chances of retaining control of the White House. And we shall see. Now all eyes turns to whatever debates are going to take place. We know there's going to be at least the one debate between Kamala and Trump, maybe more, and a debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz that will be extremely interesting. And we will look out for those. Yeah,
this was, Kamala Harris's defining moment. I think she did a good job. I think she demonstrated well that she will be different from Joe Biden because of who she is. Joe Biden is someone who is not always pro-abortion, was not always pro-gay rights. He was always was. And
well, he was for pro-gay rights for longer than Barack Obama was, interestingly enough.
But still, not as long as Kamala Harris was, and the way he supported busing and segregation policies. And what we're voting for in a president is a decision maker. And Kamala Harris has proven through her track record that she's made different decisions and will make different decisions, ones that are closer to protecting civil liberties among working people and protecting working people's interests in the economy. And so I think we can be very hopeful that Kamala Harris is going to be different than Joe Biden on all of those things, but I don't think people who care deeply about Palestine and Palestinian freedom are convinced that she is going to change course there.
Yeah, I think they are right to be unconvinced. I would argue that I'd be unconvinced there's going to be a lot of change on all those other things, although you're right that she is certainly she's of a different generation and has at points in her career been of a different philosophy and more progressive in many ways, although how sincere that is and what her actual commitments are, I have a bit of a question about, but we will certainly hear more about her policies when she does battle with Donald Trump. Thanks for watching The Hill's special coverage of the Democratic National Convention. We will be back tomorrow morning for the regular episode of Rising on Fridays. You won't want to miss that. Stay tuned.